For my final paper, I decided to stick to a topic that was common through my reading responses this semester, which was the idea of racial profiling and racism. I decided to use the book Better by Atul Gawande and examine how 3 of the 5 suggestions for being a positive deviant could be implemented in order to better the situation of racism and how we discuss race relations in this country. The first suggestion for positive deviance that I use from Gawande's book is the idea of asking an unscripted question. Asking these kinds of questions is one of the only ways that someone in my social position, a white female with a thoroughly unexotic last name, can truly begin to understand the position of someone oppressed for their race. The thing about white privilege is that the only people who consciously feel it are those who do not have it. I offer a personal story from a small group discussion in college where I asked my African American classmates about their experiences with racial profiling and discrimination within Bozeman. I was very upset to learn that both of them have experienced derogatory words being yelled at them from open car windows, lingering stares as if people were wondering if they were safe, and more police stops than I had experienced in my entire life. The story offers an example of how asking unscripted questions can help gain better knowledge about our community and about aspects of our community that we do not experience or understand. Despite my extensive reading on the subject of racial prejudice in the United States, I still naively believed that this kind of discrimination was not happening in my community. By asking my question, I was able to see how this was not the case. Even with the constant debate about whether race is or is not an issue that still affects this country, it's very easy for people, white people in particular, to convince themselves it is not an issue on the basis that they do not experience it for themselves or see it in action. However, it's important to acknowledge, much like Oliver Sacks did in his book Hallucinations, one's experiences do not seem any less real because another doesn't experience them. Because not all people will be able to experience the kind of discrimination my friends did, it's important for people to be open to asking questions. Asking questions of other people's experience not only serves to better our knowledge of our community, but also helps us to see the people fighting against oppression not as deviants and rioters, but as human beings. The next suggestion for positive deviance that I discuss is to write something. Writing about this issue needs to be happening not just among the black community, but the white community as well. Gawande states that writing something is a declaration of membership in that community and also of a willingness to contribute something meaningful to it. At this point in time, there's little cohesion happening between the discussion on race from white America and the discussion on race from black America. In a recent article, Julia Blount calls for an end to the silence that many white people have had regarding the discussion on racial inequality. This silence could be due to the fact that few white people experience discrimination, therefore it can seem inappropriate to weigh in on the matter. I think Blount would agree that by writing about race relation issues, white people are not saying that they somehow know the experiences of racial minorities, but rather that they are willing to participate in this community discussion. The act of writing about the issue helps open up a dialogue across races and shows openness by those who are part of the oppressive group to find solutions collectively. In a sense, I hope that this is what writings like mine have done through this semester. Certainly not everyone always agreed with my perspectives or my approach. However, at the end of the day, my focus on this particular issue in most of my writings for this class served as a form of positive deviance. While only the people involved in this class saw what I wrote, it was certainly a small step towards opening up the conversation. Those who are directly experiencing racial discrimination also would benefit from this discussion by writing down their experiences. One of the reasons Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail was so effective was because he wrote down his raw experiences of oppression. Through his writing, we got a glimpse of the pain and suffering he, his family, and those in his community were feeling. Much like King's writing, we need more people writing down their own observations and experiences with unjust laws like stop and frisk and the disproportionate ways in which police officers have implemented the law. Writing about these experiences from a personal perspective would help validate the statistics and claims by friends of the victims of police brutality that there is a greater underlying issue of racism behind these events. Finally, the third suggestion for positive deviance that I discuss is change. We need to look for opportunities to change if we want to make race relation issues in the United States better. This is the hardest of all the suggestions I have outlined. However, if we take one suggestion and build upon knowledge that we already possess, change is most certainly possible and sustainable. There's no doubt that there have been positive changes in the laws of this country in regards to race. The elimination of Jim Crow laws and the laws that allowed for the segregation of schools and bathrooms based on race were a landmark achievement in the fight for racial equality. It cannot be ignored, however, that even though segregation laws are a thing of the past, our present society is still highly segregated. According to Pew Research Center, despite the claims by Americans that they like to live in diverse neighborhoods, the reality is that American communities appear to have grown more politically and economically homogeneous in recent decades. The disturbing part of this information is that typically black neighborhoods are also more impoverished, have poorer public education, and more crime. Dr. King stated in his letter from Birmingham jail that all segregation statuses are unjust because segregation distorts the soul and damages the personality. It gives the segregator a false sense of superiority and the segregated a false sense of inferiority. This is exacerbated by the individualistic culture that dominates American thought. Instead of recognizing the structural barriers that limit opportunities, people tend to frame issues in Black America as personal issues. By ignoring how systems of power, as discussed by Philip Zimbardo in The Lucifer Effect, can limit and constrain one's personal agency, it gives those who do not experience those constraints a false sense of superiority. Therefore, instead of asking why someone living in a dangerous Black neighborhood does not just move away, we need to ask what structural factors led to their being trapped in said neighborhood. Changing the way in which we view social segregation and the ways in which we phrase questions about social segregation on the basis of race would help to eliminate the false sense of superiority referenced by King. Shifting the blame away from the victims of oppression to the systems that perpetuate it will produce more effective dialogue on race relations and racial inequality within our community. As the images of rioters in Baltimore flood my news feed and my television screen, I'm brought to think of Martin Luther King's statement that we know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Those viewing the situation in Baltimore from an outside perspective must be careful in how they view this situation. White America needs to set aside its own prejudices and listen. The riots cannot be seen as a destruction of one's town, but rather as an expression of frustration, pain, and oppression. Being a positive deviant could help the process of validating and understanding the experiences of those experiencing discrimination, and while they are only small steps that can be taken to improve the lives of Black Americans, they are small steps in the right direction. Thank you.